From the 2nd to the 4th centuries, martyrdom stories found in the apocryphal Acts of the Apostles were a source of great inspiration to early Christians. Systematically persecuted for their opposition to worshiping the emperor, Christians sustained their faith by reading about the apostles' heroism in the face of death.
To know what kinds of persecutions they lived with, to be bound in chains or crucified upside down or burnt at the stake, gave those Christians who were facing such difficult times courage to live their lives and to be even martyrs in some cases for the faith.
The climax in each apocryphal act is the testimonial of faith given by the apostle as he's about to die. His desire for fellowship with Christ and God endows him with fearlessness.
In each case, someone says, "Don't do this, you don't need to die." And they say, "Yes, death is important. I want to die. This is what I should do."
The apostle Andrew, Peter's brother, followed this tradition. In the Acts of Andrew, a Greek official sentences Andrew to death for converting his wife to Christianity. Instead of protesting, Andrew insists on being killed and twice refuses the opportunity to escape. During his crucifixion on an X-shaped cross, Andrew urges the crowd of onlookers to be constant and faithful to Jesus.
Andrew was on the cross for 4 days, speaking at great length and with remarkable power. Andrew goes on at length that his soul is speeding home to his true fatherland, that he's sailing past desires. He encourages others to sail with him on into the blue.
In the martyrdom narratives, it's difficult to distinguish historical fact from devotional legend. Are they true?
We don't really have an answer absolutely, did they occur and how did they occur? The best that we can ever do is offer reconstructions of history. And so we do know that elements of legend did creep in the retelling of stories.
Although it must be considered speculative, popular tradition holds that following James's beheading in Jerusalem, 10 apostles, including Peter and Paul, died violent martyrs' deaths. Thomas was tortured in India with red-hot plates and pierced by 4 spears. Philip was crucified in Turkey. Jude Thaddeus was slain with a battle axe in Persia, along with Simon, who was cut to pieces. Matthew was brutally murdered while celebrating the Lord's Supper. Matthias was killed in Ethiopia. James the Less may have been thrown from the temple in Jerusalem and stoned to death. And in Armenia, Bartholomew was skinned alive.
In undergoing usually a violent death at execution, the apostles were imitating Jesus Christ, who also underwent a similar fate. And the imitation of Christ was so important for Christian piety all through Christian history that the apostles have played a central role in this as well.
Some sketchy historical evidence exists for Peter and Paul dying in Rome during the first official persecution of Christians. It began in the year 64 under Emperor Nero.
Towards the end of his life, he started having a reputation of getting a little crazy. Ancient Roman historians tell us that Nero actually set fire to a portion of the city of Rome, and eventually, to get the blame off of himself, he blamed the Christians. They were thought of as very strange people. They were considered a superstition because they didn't accept the Roman gods. They only worshipped their one God and their one Savior, Jesus.
And so Nero decided to make a big spectacle and to show these Christians a lesson. And so apparently there were wild beasts and dogs unleashed. There were crucifixions that were scheduled. and that occurred, and there were also Christians dressed in flammable dress and set on fire. Whether or not Peter and Paul were among them was not specifically listed. If they were there at the time in the area, chances are very good that they were included in this persecution.
In the apocryphal Acts of Peter, the apostle is converting Roman wives. When their angry husbands complain to Agrippa, the Roman governor, Peter's death is ordered.
Peter is about to leave Rome because the church urges him to do so. They think he's going to be arrested and executed imminently, and they tell him to flee. And as he's on the way out of Rome, he meets Jesus. And he asks Jesus, "Where are you going, my Lord?" which is quo vadis in Latin. And Jesus looks at him and says, "I'm going to Rome to be crucified again." And then Peter recognizes that Jesus is symbolically saying to him that he, Peter, is going to undergo martyrdom and will imitate Christ in following him in martyrdom. So Peter turns around and goes back into Rome.
Peter asked to be crucified upside down because he doesn't feel worthy of being crucified in the same way as Jesus. After declaring his love for Jesus, whom he calls my everything, Peter dies. Nero is responsible for Paul's death in the apocryphal Acts of Paul.
Paul says, Christ will come, this king will come, and he will destroy all of their kingdoms, including you and yours. Well, Nero then decides that he must do away with Paul and has him beheaded. But instead of blood coming out of the wound, milk issued from his severed neck. It was a very interesting image. It could mean, for example, that Paul was nurturing. He, in fact, calls his churches his children.
According to Christian Apocrypha, the Apostle John and Mary Magdalene were spared torturous deaths.
Mary Magdalene lived out the rest of her life in the desert as a hermit, hardly recognizable anymore as a woman, very famous for her sanctity. When she died, then it was discovered, and they retrieved her body, that she was a woman and that she was indeed this saint.
John died of natural causes at the age of about 100 in Ephesus, Turkey, at the close of the 1st century. His last words to his disciples are said to have been, "Little children, love one another."
By depicting one of Jesus' own disciples, and a beloved one at that, dying of old age, without a martyr's death, demonstrates to the reader that they can be witnesses to Jesus without martyrdom.